Deputy Leader.
Thank you, sir. The motion, sir, is that this House has no confidence in the Health Minister. It sets out why. The motion points out that the Minister has failed the people of South Australia when it comes to health policy, and in particular he has failed the people of South Australia in relation to Labor's signature health policy of fixing the ramping crisis. There is not a South Australian who can forget during that 2022 election campaign every TV ad showing Ash the Ambo calling on South Australians to vote Labor like their life depended on it, nor every poster and every Stobie poll from Mount Gambier to Port Lincoln and every street in South Australia, it seemed, with the Premier's face on it, saying Labor will fix the ramping crisis. This was the commitment from the Labor Party. And on half a dozen occasions throughout February and March of 2022, the Labor Minister for Health highlighted either Labor will fix the ramping crisis, or Labor has a comprehensive plan to fix the ramping crisis, or indeed one version was only Labor has a plan to fix the ramping crisis. The Premier and the Deputy Premier throughout the course of this debate have framed the question that they say the opposition should be answering as what policy critique, what policy analysis have we done of Labor's Health Minister that leads us to the conclusion that we should have no confidence in him? I'd put to you, sir, and I put to the Parliament that it is about outcomes, not inputs. It is about Labor being held to account according to the criteria that they set for the former government and which they set for themselves. It's about the Labor Health Minister being held to account for the policy which he would have been directed in his letter of appointment by the Premier to deliver on. Labor's central tenet for existence in government was their promise to fix the ramping crisis. Labor's central tenet during the election campaign to the people of South Australia was that they would do better than the former government on health. But we're interested in outcomes, sir. So what have those outcomes been by the standards to which the former government was held to account by the Health Minister? In August 2021, when there were 2,727 hours ramped, compared to 3,763 hours lost in 2022 in August, and 3,721 hours lost to the ramp in August 2023, and 4,773 hours lost to the ramp last month. The Minister for Health said in relation to 2021 that each of the months thus far was worse than the previous highest ever record of April this year. Each and every one of those hours represents a person stuck in pain, without dignity, not getting the treatment they deserve, ramping at that time 2,000 hours or so less than it is last month. In August, also, the Premier set some standards. He said, emergency departments are for emergencies, and it is clearly unacceptable for anyone to have to wait nearly 15 hours to be seen in an emergency. Behind all of these people are real people. Behind all these people are real people with real stories of suffering. I can't imagine what it's like to wait nearly 15 hours to be seen in an emergency department. Sir, at 12:51 p.m. today, the Adelaide ED Twitter account reported that there were 10 people in South Australia waiting not 15 hours but more than 24 hours, a whole day for a bed in a hospital, and 32 had been waiting more than 12 hours. In November 2021, when there were 2,137 hours lost to the ramp compared to 3,516 hours lost in November 2022 and 4,285 hours lost in November 2023 and 4,773 hours lost last month, the Health Minister said the following. He said, so far during 2021, ambulances have spent 21,043 hours on the ramp. That was up to November. He thought that was very bad. I note, sir, that so far this year, at the end of May, Ambulance had spent 20,035 hours on the ramp. I suspect by the end of this week we'll have passed that figure that was described as so terrible at the time. In that period, the Health Minister said each of the past 7 months has seen more than 2,000 hours lost to ramping. So each of the past 12 months today has seen more than 3,000 hours lost to ramping. 3 of them more than 4,000 hours. The Health Minister at that time said yet again these statistics paint a picture of how bad the ramping crisis is under Stephen Marshall. He said whichever way Stephen Marshall slices and dices the numbers, this is an appalling record. He said, but behind these numbers are real stories of real people suffering medical emergencies and forced to wait outside a hospital or left waiting for an ambulance to arrive. So I put it to you that if the November 2021 ramping figures, disappointing and unacceptable as they may have been, if they were achieved in any any of the last 24 months, the Premier and the Deputy Premier and the Health Minister would have been lining up to celebrate, despite the fact that the former government, during a once-in-a-century pandemic, had world-leading outcomes when it came to our health response, despite the fact that we reopened a hospital closed by the Premier when he was Health Minister, despite the fact that through all of this, the Minister for Health and the Premier said that people are dying and the former government should be culpable for their loss when it comes to the voting booth, they now want to relieve themselves of any responsibility for figures that are far, far, far worse. By the standards to which they held the former government, by the standards they set through their central election promise, and indeed by the standards of decency held by any South Australian, this Health Minister should resign as a sign of the failure of this government to deliver on their promise.
Yeah.